Do you remember when we first met?
I don't remember. He's the godfather of psychedelics and mushrooms. Like, he did a big book on it, and I had to sit next to him. 300 people there, and I come to discover they all just wanted to talk about shrooms with this guy.
And you were supposed to drop some very sacred indigenous knowledge.
Yeah, I was supposed to be all chiefy there, and it was like the most chiefiest, like, yeah, I was on a panel of wizards and shamans and psychedelic masters. I think as leaders, I think that's something that's really a struggle sometimes, is that how do we meet people where they're at, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we build a movement that is empathetic to the wide range of emotions and righteous rage that's out there?
I'm Jade Begay, and this is Jaded. On today's show, we have a true multi-hyphenate. Dallas Goldtooth is a writer, a playwright, a poet, an actor, a comedian. You've probably seen Dallas on hit shows like Reservation Dogs, Fallout on Amazon, and most recently, Last Frontier on Apple TV. On today's show, we get into topics like being a jaded activist, and we share some reflections on 10 years after the Standing Rock movement. Hi, Dallas. Welcome to the show.
I'm so excited to be here.
Yay! Not to mess up your vibe too much, but I have to ask, is there anything that's got you jaded lately, recently?
I don't know. I feel like, you know me, Jade, you and we've known each other for a long time. I am fairly easygoing, and it kind of takes a bit for me to get worked up. I think that, I guess what has gotten me jaded is, I guess, the ongoing lack of media literacy within our movement. Of, folks are, I think people are mindful of the pitfalls and dangers of how media spins a story and narrative to generate emotions that may not necessarily be based on facts.
Yeah.
But then I think that we just quickly forget how much that is influencing us, right? And causing division, discord amongst a movement, but also just kind of, we're stuck in a cycle, and it keeps going and going, and then you can't help but get frustrated, and we're like, no, don't tweet that, don't message that. That's like, you're falling for it. You're falling for the pitfall to make people hyper focus on the rage and the emotional reaction, as opposed to like, okay, this is actually a strategy that the opposition is playing on us. So
what's an example, maybe recently, that we've fallen for?
Oh, the one that's most recent is,
yes.
And the question, actually, and on top of it, you don't know whether what you're seeing is actually real or not, right? Because you have to question whether these are bots you're looking at. But the recent one is Mandami just visiting the Trump White House. And there are people, I've seen a handful of people who are saying, like, he fucking sold out. He went to the White House and he didn't do this and didn't do that. And I'm like, yo, all right, like, that's your take? That's the take you're going to make? Because I think that's a wrong take.
That's a boring take, honestly.
It is. It has no kind of strategery behind it. The other one, the big one, the one that's like has been driving me, is this it's almost a reaction to other people's jadedness. The jadedness as a result of, like, we told you this is why you should have voted for Harris. And there's almost that response of, like, I'm jaded responding to the jadedness. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like, it's like,
yeah, I think, something that I have been jaded about, similar to you in reflection, is just like, are we not going to talk about it? Are we not going to talk about the, like, the disillusionment that we have openly? Because I want to be honest about those feelings of disillusionment or those feelings of cynicism, and then of course move through it. But yeah, I think at least it's important to be honest about how we're feeling, and to the personal, to the macro, especially when we're thinking of like big macro issues like, the state of our government, the state of our society right now.
Absolutely. No, I think you nailed it. What is it? Hit the hammer on the nail or the nail on the
Hit
hammer.
the nail. I don't know. All these like
Not good with words.
American slang things always confuse me. I'm like, cart before the what? Well, back to the media literacy topic. I actually want to get into that a bit, but first, before we go too deep into that conversation, um, and this is kind of related, but I want to ask because you know we've known each other for quite some time, and I want to ask you. This is a little bit of a quiz. Do you remember when we first met?
Hell no. I don't remember. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You're
Damn.
the constant present. Let's say that you're that cousin that was always there. Always there. It's the earliest memories. I remember.
And okay, so the reveal, I'm not sure if it was the first time we met, but the uh one of the bigger moments where we got to work together on the ground was in Paris for COP 21. This was the COP, and this is a very climate heady event in the year, but it's Conference of the Parties. It's the big UN climate talks, and they happen every year. But we were there. It was my first time, and it was the big one where they officially signed. All these nations officially signed the Paris Climate Agreement.
Yeah, that's right. I think we had a couple of like rented out a couple of apartments. You had this really cool loft apartment that you were staying in while we were out there, and
That
yeah, that
just
was a pretty
became the hub.
yeah.
You guys
We
took
were
over.
we were there for like 2.5 weeks. We had a delegation. I think we had a total delegation of like 65 people, Indigenous folks from North America who came out for that. And yeah,
Mhm.
that was the big moment. That was like the COP 16, right? Or 15. What was it again?
No, it's 21.
21. Okay, 21. See, they all mixed up. But that was like the 20 years prior were kind of leading up to this big signing. And yeah, you really held it down. You came on as kind of coordinated our media team effort. And that was pretty amazing
Well, that was
to
like when Indigenous rising media like had its big first moment.
mm-hmm.
And again, back to that media literacy thing, I think we were attempting at, yeah, creating something that could help inform our people and show them, like, not quite the BTS, but like improve and strengthen the understanding of these types of moments.
Yeah. I did look because when we talked about you when we prepped before this call, before
Hmm.
our thing, I looked in my cloud of my photos. The earliest photo I have older photos that for some reason they didn't get uploaded, but the oldest one I have is from a music festival that you brought everybody to.
Oh my God.
What was
Remember,
it called? What's the music festival called?
we, so I have some friends who put on Lightning in a Bottle,
Yes.
and it's, I don't even know if it still happens anymore, but um, it was a music festival in kind of like, I don't know how to explain it. Maybe it was like a burner kind of vibe of a festival. And yeah, my friends they were curating a portion or a segment of the festival where there were like talks happening, and there was, yeah, I believe there was like, I think like Amy Goodman was there. Speaking
Yep.
of, I think like that
Ariel
mushroom.
Derange was there that year.
Yeah, we brought her in. That mushroom guy, Paul Stamens, is that his name?
Yeah, dude, I was on that panel with Paul Stamens and folks that know him. If they're listening, they're like, "Oh snap!" Let's talk to him. And then the vast majority of the people are like, "Who?" He's like this older white guy that wears a mushroom hat, a hat made out of mushrooms. He's the godfather of psychedelics and mushrooms. Like he did a big book on it, and I had to sit next to him. Jade put me on a panel with him. I had no idea who he was, and then all these like there was like 300 people there, and I come to discover they all just wanted to talk about shrooms with this guy,
Yeah.
and it was fun.
And you were supposed to drop some very sacred indigenous knowledge.
Yeah, I was supposed to be all cheap there, and it was like the most cheapiest, like out there kind of panel because we had the white guy shroom dude, and there was like someone from like somewhere in South America, and he's wearing all white, and he had this massive like Gandalf staff,
Oh
and
God.
yeah, I was on a panel of wizards and shamans and psychedelic masters. Thank you,
Uh,
Jade. Thank you.
yeah, anytime, just whenever you want to get back out there. In that scene, I got you. Another time where we got to spend a lot of time together was Standing Rock. In fact,
Mhm.
like there was like our whole team, like I don't know, like 5 to 10 of us at any given moment living in this yurt on Facebook Hill.
Mhm. Yeah, that you actually lived there. And I know like
Yeah.
I had to go, I have a family and I was going back and forth, but you live there in the yurt on top of the hill on what they call Facebook Hill. And we're representing. I think that was the first time we were like, okay, we need somebody that knows what they're doing, can handle it like a boss, and can like help create and generate media and help get the story out there. But also someone that's dependable and that can be there. And you were like, I can do it. And we talked to you about it, and you were willing to
Hmm.
move into the yurt on top of the hill at Standing Rock. Um,
Yeah.
and that was a huge moment. I think a huge moment for everybody in the like indigenous rights movement, anybody that was kind of anyone that was affiliated to a kind of indigenous mobilization or indigenous work. The Standing Rock was the moment, right? As the largest mass mobilization of indigenous peoples in Canada and the United States in living memory. And
Right.
so it was a huge thing, and you were a big part of that. And we kind of our job collectively was just to help get the message out there and keep people informed.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That was a big moment, I think, for me in my like trajectory. Like I definitely grew so much from that experience. But I reflect on this a lot, the way maybe we have or haven't collectively processed what
Mm.
happened there. Do you think we've even had space to do that?
Oh, that's a great question. I think yes and no. I think in some
Mm,
ways some folks have because the thing about Standing Rock, it was such a amalgamation of so many different spheres of 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 indigenous peoples, right? You had so many people involved, whether it's straight grassroots, these are common folks from the ground, they're from local communities there on the ground. You had national organizers there. You had big indigenous institutions who were involved, and everybody was playing a different role. And I think that depending on where you were fitting into it, you might have
mhm,
gotten that closure. You might have found that kind of resolution of like processing everything, and you might not have. And um, I think that there is still a lot of I, I don't I don't know if it's pain. I think there is obviously some kind of collective pain about like how things happened, broke down, and
mm,
went. But then also, I feel like in a way there's pain, but there is not defeat.
mhm,
Like across the board, actually talking to folks, there's not a sense of defeat that you
mm,
lost that. I think that there's enough of a spatial awareness of like, hey, this was one major fight, a part of a much larger ongoing fight, and that we are continuing to push forward and continue to hold the line in many different ways. So, I mean, at least that's how I feel. I'm not sure there's other folks who are like, all down and out, like, oh man, that's like we lost that, and like, yeah, it was a really hard campaign, but I think
mhm.
that through all of it, in Native folks, I think a lot of our people are look, we know what's going on.
Yeah.
We knew it was just a part of a legacy of attacks upon our peoples. And it
Mhm.
doesn't matter who's in office. It doesn't matter if it's a Republican or a Democrat. The idea is that we are still dealing with an antagonistic state
Right.
that does not want to acknowledge the rights of indigenous peoples. And so
Right.
with the long game in mind, I think a lot of people have that energy still. Like we're going to continue to not give up. And it was amazing. We take what we want from it, and we learn what we needed to learn out of it. I sure as have tried to learn from from learn from the
Yeah.
movement and from that moment.
What was your biggest lesson you think from that moment in time?
Oh, I think on a very practical level, like, so for folks that are aware, like I played, like, I had a number of hats. That's like on the ongoing story for me is I wear a number of different hats. Um, at Standing Rock, you know, we as an organization at the time, you and I both worked for an organization that was one of the original organizations that were doing organizing on Dakota Access Pipeline. One of our sisters, who has since passed on, Joy Braun, was
Mm,
actually the forefront of this. She was the first person. Actually, the first time I ever heard of Dakota Access Pipeline was from Joy Braun.
mhm.
She was a firecracker organizer that didn't go along with a lot of people, but also did it was fierce and was a warrior in the truest sense, and put it on everybody's radar. But we and because of that, I was actively involved in the media work, but also kind of organizing space. But the lesson I learned from it is the absolute necessity for solid logistics. Like,
Mhm.
you overlook the logistics and you prioritize tactics and
Mm,
actions, sometimes to the detriment of what are the logistics to make this effective, right? And
mhm.
so there's the actual logistics of how do we create a camp? How do we create an actual infrastructure that can make us communicate effectively? I think that was one of the greatest barriers, as you probably are well aware, like on the ground, is on the ground local communication. How are
Yep.
we communicating effectively amongst each other so that there is a common understanding of narrative. There's a
Mhm.
common understanding of narrative strategy, and that our actions are built from that common language. So I think that was the greatest. I think as an organizer, that's something I learned from it. Is like, okay, we have to make sure that we have an infrastructure and a logistics base that can feed a solid narrative strategy. We have to have an effective um, apparatus that can uplift those who need to be uplifted and lessen the voices that need to be lessened. If that makes sense. There's people that are like, that are become the face, that may become the face, or their messaging may be like not helpful. And we're
Mhm.
like, all right, how do we respond to that? So I think that's the biggest thing. I think the other lesson is just like, this is very more personal to me because I'm Dakota. I was raised amongst
Mm,
Dakota Ochechi Shakoni people. This happened in Hunkpapa Lakota territory. Also, there's also Dakota people there. We're the same tribe, different bands. Long story,
mhm.
but what I learned from it, that I feel like is applicable to a lot of our struggles as Indigenous peoples, is that there's a certain, this is a hot take, might piss some people off, but I feel like there's a certain unwillingness to acknowledge what we don't know.
Mm,
There's a certain fear of acknowledging ignorance. And I say that meaning, like, we were there in Standing Rock and we had set up the Ochechi shot going, and people were like, this is a time for us to assert our own perspective of governance. There's a time for us to say, boom, this is what governance looks like to us. We're going to create a space, a camp built on liberation and freedom and built on Lakota values and principles. And we want to make sure that we are creating this a decolonial space. And it was
mhm.
liberatory to be there. It was a decolonial practice of existing of living in resistance to extraction. But there's also this emphasis on, like, we're going to bring back the old ways and teachings of how to form a camp,
Mm,
because we need to form a camp and create a leadership structure that will push back and stop this pipeline. Right? It was the real talk. That was like the whole goal is to stop the pipeline.
right,
But
exactly.
in doing so, we have to acknowledge we don't know what our people live like. The oldest people of our, like, that's where acknowledging the ignorance is. The oldest of our elders,
Mm,
to be absolutely honest, do not have the lived experience of a decolonial governance system. We have
mhm.
the stories, we have the narratives, we have teachings that have been passed down to us, but what does it actually look like in practice? We don't know. And so how can we create a base of liberation ideology without acknowledging what we don't know and build from there? You know, is that there's almost an assumption of, like, this is the way it has to be because this is what I believe it is, rather than how about we create together based on what we know and what we need right now in the moment.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought up governance. I've actually Yeah, I've actually been reflecting on that a lot, as far as uh the ways that I wanna well, I think the ways that I just yeah, I think there's been like a gap in some of our movement work. Like you said earlier, there's gaps with our media literacy and how we navigate that space, whether it's digital media or any kind of media, traditional comms, etc. But I also think that yes, we do advocacy. Yes, we, hold, we organize against these systems. But um, you know, I think a lot of people could agree that there's been so much of like, stop this, stop that. And like, but what are we building and how does that like, how are we informing ourselves about how we get there? And I think yeah, a lot like, I think sometimes we reject the notion of governance because it's like, "Ooh, that's colonial," or "That sounds like, like authority," but no, like, governance is literally just how a community runs, and I think we just need to bring like, those concepts more into our movement and, yeah, and like you said, reconnect with ways to understand how we do wanna govern, how we do wanna build our communities.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I've been organizing for a while,
Mhm,
and have had an immense opportunity to like work with frontline communities who are in the middle of the trap, who are deep in the thick of very hyper localized issues of violence and struggle and hardship,
mhm,
but then also worked on at a national level and at an international level, and seeing the wide range of those who are in a movement to make things better has allowed me to like really say, oh, like where are we disconnected? Where are we
mhm,
actually, where are the gaps, right? Um, and I think that the eye in the sky, or the pie in the sky,
mm,
is indigenous governance, right? The goal
mhm.
that we fight for is true self-determination and
Yes.
a full acknowledgement of our inherent rights as indigenous peoples without qualification. Free, prior, and informed consent is that plaque on the wall that we point to and we say that is a cornerstone that we deserve. That is a part of that is a critical aspect of who we are. Um, but in order to really work towards that, I think there's a general need for emotional intelligence within the movement and this development of empathy to
Mm,
understand, to meet people where they're at. I think as
mhm,
leaders, I think that's something that's really a struggle sometimes, is to how do we meet people where they're at, right?
mhm,
And how do we build a movement that is empathetic to the wide range of emotions and righteous rage that's out there, and keep us focused. I think that's the true struggle of an organizer in this moment,
mm.
is like to carry all that and to maintain the principles while you're moving forward together. Um, I think is really key.
I agree, and knowing what we know about how last year played out, 2024, and then now kind of seeing, you know, just our communities under constant attack. How do we become more unified, especially as Indigenous peoples in this moment?
One is, I honestly, I think we have to temper our understanding and expectation of unity, knowing how
Mm,
diverse our peoples are, right?
yeah.
Truly understand that like there's such a wide array of perspectives of traditional forms of governance within Indian country that honestly, when we talk about fighting towards that direction, we're going to see that manifest in many different ways. With all that said, unity it doesn't mean pretending we're the same. I think really
Mm,
comes down to, are we fostering the relationships that we need to have to build a system that is better, right? Um, it's I think it's normalizing language is a big aspect of that. That how it kind of creates this common understanding of things. example of that. The language of land back, right, is a framing. It's a organizing framework that has been like in some ways co-opted by a lot of folks, right? It was just like really grassroots kind of sporadic instant thing that came up, and then people just kind of
Mm,
gravitated it because it had meaning to them. They were able to put their own meaning into it.
right.
And that defined a relationship to like, okay, this is how we want to relate to land. The
Mhm.
idea of ownership and stewardship. Um, so I think that's what comes to mind. I think of I've been I'm happy you brought up the election stuff. I think I brought it up first. I'm not sure, but um, I feel like what I was frustrated with it, and I carry some of this too. A load of like
Mm.
um, you know, I came out like super last minute to like posting about folks should vote, and I had my
Also, we
reasons to.
talked about this a lot during, or not a lot, but you and I like checked in last year about some of
Yeah,
this. We were
we did.
struggling.
We checked in. I posted something last minute, like literally like 2 days before the election or something, a day, because I literally struggled with the idea of like, do I say something, right? And then
Mm,
that there's a is there what is the responsibility for someone in my position that has influence in Indian country? I think what I struggled with is that there's the assumption that natives are inherently Democrat, even though we tend
mm,
to vote Democrat. And what I argue is that um, it only like we only vote for Democrat because it's the one party that has historically caused less harm than the
mhm,
other party. So that doesn't
mhm,
necessarily guarantee loyalty. Uh, that in a form, it is self defense, right?
mm, mhm.
And the and so the rebuttal is like, well, voting is self defense, right? Why didn't more people vote because of self defense? It's because I feel like folks didn't feel safe, right? They didn't feel
Mhm,
defended.
mm,
So if people are
mhm.
voting for self defense, if they don't feel defended, where's the drive to move forward? And I
Right.
think that for a lot of our people, that's where it comes from. Is it's our priority is our lands, our priority is in our communities, our priority is in future generations. And if they don't feel like if that is not prioritized and uplifted, then there's not going to be a drive there. I mean, dude, the freaking the Democrat platform hasn't changed. Like they like polish a few words here and there. They shift words around every year and say, "Oh, this is our new plank, our new platform." It doesn't really change.
Yeah.
So I think that consistently for Native peoples, it comes down to consistency, and for us, we have been consistent in our narrative around sovereignty, land, and future generations, and that the ability for us to decide what happens to our bodies, what happens to
Mhm.
our air and our water is the
Yeah,
consistent framework. And if no, someone's not willing to defend that, then you're not going to get us to buy into your power systems.
totally. I think what I grieved, in real time as the election was playing out and then post was, kind of back to our conversation about governance. Um, I was grieving the leadership that specifically the native leadership that we were going to clearly lose if we lost. And when we did lose, um, or when MAGA won, rather, um, I was really grieving the native leadership that was in like positions of power that we've never seen before, and
Mm-hmm.
how they made inroads for us to um, potentially take power back and potentially, have um, more, I guess, of a stronger role in how things are governed and how things like implicate our tribes. Obviously, very specifically talking about Department of Interior, which is such a that department in particular just has such a um, massive impact on our tribes and our communities and our lands, obviously. Um, yeah, I think that's what I kind of wanted to protect that. I kind of wanted to protect like the leadership that was um there, and not that it was like end all be all, like the best leadership ever. I mean, it was incredible to watch, especially, Auntie Deb leading in the role she was in, but um to strengthen that, to be like, okay, this is like, we've gotten this far, let's build on it. I was sad about not being able to build on what had been achieved thus far, up until
Yeah.
2024. And
That's real.
I know these next few years that everything was just going to be thrown in the trash, and we're, sadly just watching it play out right now.
Yeah.
So,
No, that's real. I mean, I hear that. I appreciate
yeah.
that framing of it, of like, especially for you. Like you were,
Mm,
working you had a role that actually was trying to actively continue that leadership that was there. Um, and for me, I think it comes down like, I feel like there's a mismatch of values, not on a personal level between you and I,
mm.
but just like what was being pushed
Oh,
of
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
a
I mean, it
mixed
was a
match of
hot
like,
mess.
yeah, it was
20
a hot mess. Um, and I do believe, like, as problematic as it is, and I feel like this is triggering for a lot of folks, is I do believe there's something to like like if anything we've learned from this Trump administration is how fragile
Mhm,
the very institutions that our survival depends on really are. You know,
mm,
that how fragile this idea of rules of law and order is. And honestly, what I find motivating about it, and I guess in utilizing it as a kind of an organizing approach, is how fragile the idea of, the Constitution, what is law, right? And like how that can
mm.
easily be redefined and changed. And for
Yeah,
us, for people for generations to say, oh, it's impractical for us to uplift treaty rights, or impractical for us to really push hard on true uh, self-determination or true sovereignty. I'm like, if they can just willy-nilly redefine stuff, why can't? Because all it is, we're just telling stories, and they're just telling a really good story, quote unquote, it's good, but a story that is effective.
mhm,
And I think that if anything, what we're seeing at the Trump administration is reinforces a lot of the work that we have done around narrative strategy, of like the inherent power of a story, and
mhm.
how that can pivot political structures, that can pivot social structures in such defining ways. And that's so often what we're pushed back against is, oh, that's cute. Let's talk about policy. And I'm like, policy has its place here, right?
Mhm,
But where is the strategy, and how? That's where I get frustrated with folks. I think that's where a lot of Native people get frustrated, because
mm.
when we get these folks into like in the Biden administration, the Obama administration, there becomes this point where it's like, okay, the story of the people on the ground kind of gets left outside the room. And the message is like, okay, that story helped me get here. But once we're in the room, we're going to have to compromise and come down to the nitty gritty of politics and policies. I get that. I know that's what happens. But there's, I guess, a general sense of like, there's why people don't trust the government. There's why our people have, even if they're native or not, we're like, they don't, the Washington DC doesn't really have the back of Indian country,
Yeah.
that's, so yeah, I don't know if that is that a jumbled mess. I don't know. I don't know if that all
No,
made
no, no.
sense,
It
but yeah.
made sense, and I think my response is like, I think this is why I feel like I don't even live in New York City, but I was so amped about Zaron Mondami's campaign because that story was so apparent and so clear.
Mm,
And he ran on a very, to your point earlier, like a story that really met people where they're at, a story that empathized with, the everyday person living in New York City, commuting across New York City, and I'm pumped. I'm excited to see what happens um, from there, and also like how it's inspired a whole wave of young people to step up into leadership. Because I honestly just think we need new leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. Well, you know, talking about organizing and all of that's fun, but I want to get into something more fun.
Let's do it. Let's do
Yeah.
it.
So I want to talk about the pivot in your life. As of like a couple of years ago, a few years ago, you've really dedicated your energy, your time into acting. And I just want to talk about the journey you've had.
Yeah.
What made you finally like really kind of commit to that switch?
Oh, yeah. So, the short timeline is in 2020. Like a lot of folks, I got burnt out. I hit the
Mm,
wall. Like I found, like in my organizing life, I was working for the Indigenous Environmental Network. The amount of hours I was putting in that time, it was all remote, but there was just like this sense of like 2020 was a lot, right? And we're
mm,
trying to process out all that the Trump administration did, and then come into the Biden administration. Um, and I got burnt out,
mhm,
and I found myself checking out. And then this opportunity with Reservation Dogs to be in it and shoot that first season was during 2020. October 2020 is when we shot the pilot for Reservation Dogs. Reservation Dogs is a show that's on FX for folks that don't know, and it was created by my good friend of mine, Sterling Harjo, who I co-created a comedy group with. We was 5 of us that created a comedy group called the 1491s, and I got this job to be an actor in it. So I did that while also organizing. So like I took time off to go do the acting, and I came back, and then second season came about, and Sterling asked me to be a writer for the show as well as
mm,
acting in it. And there was a real logistical issue of like, I can't do both. Like I
mhm,
can't, like the writing commitment is so much work. And also the act, we were just now kicking off a campaign to get Biden to declare a climate emergency. Go figure, a president can declare a national emergency on any old thing and make all this tremendous wide sweeping change. If only Biden did that. Damn it. But no, we were in the middle of this launching this big campaign while I was also trying to come on to being onboarded the Reservation Dogs. And I had to make a choice. I really had to like come down to like, okay, what do I need to want to do? While all the years prior, while I was working for IEN, the Indigenous Environmental Network, and doing all this organizing, on the side, I was doing comedy work at the 1491s. It was my
mhm,
outlet. I did that like maybe once or twice a month. I would go on a random job. We'd go to some tribal college and do a show. That was how I got through all of that. That's what actually kept me
mm,
sane, was I had an artistic outlet. I had
mhm,
somewhere to feed that energy. And so continued to find that in Reservation Dogs as a writer
mm,
and actor. And so I had made a choice. I was like, all right, I want to always find joy in what I'm doing. And right now, this is where my path is leading me towards. And so I decided just to jump all in.
yeah,
I want to transition away from the organization, transition away from the organizing work, and jump into being a writer and actor. And that was in 2020. I officially jumped off in 2022. I did a 6-month plan to offboard and to transition out. But yeah, it was like scary. It was terrifying. And it made it even more complicated because the moment I like jumped out and I was like, okay, I'm a full-time writer and actor, the acting and writing strike hit. And so there was
oh
no work for
god.
like a big minute, but I
Why was
stuck with
it
it.
why was it scary? Say more about that. Like, just because it was a
Well,
new thing, or
it it was a new thing. It was a risk. I have I'm a father of 6,
Mhm.
right? I have to like. There's a logistical need of like I have to feed my family. I have to make sure they're
Yes.
taken care of. There has to be some security, financial security for my family. But the other part, the more emotional part, is that I felt so much weight and responsibility on my shoulders. I was letting people down, right?
Right.
Transitioning out, I felt this like, oh man, all these people depend on me. I
Mhm.
can't just leave them hanging. And it took me a while to come to get over myself, to get over my own ego and be
Mm.
like, you know what, the movement existed before you and it will exist after you. And you are we are all tremendous players in that, but we are, not responsible for it necessarily. Like that's the nature of movement, is that we are all a part of the current, but the current flows no matter what. And that's the
Mhm.
hope. That's the hope part of it. Like, right. We believe in the capacity of others to generate movement. And I
Mhm.
am putting my energy into that. And I know that where I'm at now, I'm still feeding it, but in a different way. But that was real. Like that sense of like, I had people I worked with,
Mhm.
frontline communities, that I had to kind of be like, hey, are you okay? Like, I'm moving out of this. Are you going to be okay? And they're like, yeah, dude, you're like, we love to see you. We love seeing you on screen. Like, this is fine. But you have to let go. There's an ego part of it, of just
Yeah.
letting go.
Oh, I can really relate to that. Also, I was gonna say, I was gonna interrupt you, but I'm like, you weren't just rolling in it from all the organizing work you've done,
Yeah.
right? Because 'Cause we're like, what does the right call us? Like, I don't know, these like freeloading, like organizing,
Oh yeah, we're just paid
woke,
activists,
yeah,
woke.
paid activists. Well, I'm so glad you did that, Dallas. I know it was like it's always been a passion for you, and I know you like you sacrifice some of that joy from time to time to show up for movements, campaigns, all the work that like exists for that. And I think, maybe even there was like an expectation from the movement, community, your colleagues to like keep it going and step
Mm.
into, like more leadership at IEN. And I'm so glad you did what you like really wanted to do, which is acting and leaning into like the comedy side of yourself. I think it's really I'm just glad you're modeling that for people.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's important for us to, I believe that our younger generation, so millennials, even some Gen Xers, but like we are breaking some generational curses, right? We are kind of trying to break some cycles here, and I think one of those cycles is like, uh, expectations and, just like the expectation that you have to give everything, right? You have to burn
Mhm.
yourself out for a movement,
Yeah.
and I've through my own spiritual journey, I've come to really understand like you're nothing if you don't have a strong sense of self-worth and a strong standing, right? You're stronger if you have that. There's so
Mhm.
many people that are able to still be strong advocates and leaders, but they sacrifice so much of their well-being in doing so. And I
Mhm.
think that we have to create some, definitely uplift more models of that, as you mentioned. I think the other one is, I think what I'm trying to talk about is boundaries, of
Mm.
understanding, setting boundaries for folks to say, this is what I'm able to give and this is what I'm not able to give.
Mhm.
And
So important.
for that to be a reciprocal conversation, to be like, okay, this is what community needs. This is what they can't give, or what they don't need. And the same for me as an individual. I think if anything I've tried to work on is with people is understand the boundaries.
Mm. Yeah. I think I was lucky to come into like my movement work to observe some of these leaders that, who are mentors or who are teachers. I was lucky to see, again, in a way, lucky to see how the way that they were driving themselves into the ground, kind of the boundaries thing. It's an evolving lesson throughout life, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanna get into a game.
Let's do it.
Okay, do you have a pair of sunglasses by you, by any chance? Heck yeah.
I got the
What are
like,
those, Matrix glasses?
no, these are like my
Speedy glasses?
MAGA iron oil worker glasses,
This game is called Shade with Jade. Basically, we get to throw shade.
Okay.
All right, you ready? I'm
not ready. I have no idea. Okay, I am not ready. Let's go.
What I'm gonna do is throw out some questions, throw out some prompts, and it's just a time for us to relax and throw some shade, spill some tea, be petty. You ready? Okay.
I'm ready.
All right. Most chaotic, unhinged thing of 2025.
Most chaotic, unhinged thing of 2025. The interview of Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden. Those interviews with Channel 5, fucking fire and unhinged. I love it. Bring it.
That is the empathy. That is the media we need.
Yeah.
All right. Next. Okay, so we know we can't exist in Indian country without teasing ourselves. So, in the spirit of that, what was your worst red carpet or glam look to date? A look where you were like, what the F was I thinking?
Ooh, dude, I don't got one. Girl, I look good every red carpet I've taken.
Wow.
Why are you trying to throw that on me? What are you trying to say? Huh? What are you trying to say, Jade?
I'm just look.
No,
you,
okay.
You said we gotta stay humble.
I did
your ego was
we gotta stay
dismantled.
Humble. We gotta stay humble, but also real. So just kidding. No, there was the Emmy Awards, and we got a stylist, non-native stylist. She did all right, but she had some looks, or I'm like, oh, I don't know about those looks, and I'm a texture person, and so I had these weird pants I didn't like because the texture just threw me off, and I didn't feel comfortable. And I was like, always like, when you don't feel comfortable in your clothes, it just reflects. And I had a hard time. And that was the pre-party, like one of the pre-show events I went to in a style outfit. So,
well, yeah. I gotta say, your recent looks with the Relative Arts people have been on point. So.
Shout out to Relative Arts. Hell
yes, yeah. Yes. Okay, wildest thing that's been said about you online.
Jade, do I have an extra hour to list all the things? Let's see. That I've worked with. Oh, that I stole $50,000 from Standing Rock fight. I had a duffel bag of $50,000.
Again, why I was asking why you were. I thought you were loaded.
Yeah. And there was a story that I was a narc for that I was actually a National Guards member. And now I was infiltrating the camp as a National Guards member, which I was like, I don't know how that works. I've said the word logistics like 20 times on this podcast so far. I think that there was one where somebody confused me for one of their cousins who embezzled and did some violent homicide stuff, and they're like, that was you, huh? And I'm like, no, that was not me. And they're like, and their auntie went on the post. It was all on social media, and the auntie was like, no, you're talking about Dallas so and so and so, another Dallas that I got mistaken for. So I guess I've stolen money, I've killed people, and I also was a National Guard narc.
Tracks.
All tracks.
Yes. This just reminds me of the I don't know, the web of activists that the company that put Dapple through. I just love that exists.
Oh, the Tiger Swan.
Yeah, Tiger Swan.
Mercenary list.
You look like you work for Tiger Swan right now.
I do. Yeah.
Are you okay? Final one. Are you quite upset that you did not end up winning hottest Native man by Indigenous TV?
Yes, because it's the damn Navajos. The damn Navajo vote took it away from me. There's just it
As
just
we do, as we do.
it just it's voter fraud. You cannot trust the Navajo vote. I think there's an inherent dysfunction there. You know,
Yep.
they're out to
Na-
get me.
Navajo supremacy.
The Navajo supremacy in its finest degree. There's a conspiracy. The Navajos are have their hands in all things in Indian country, and I'm here to expose it.
Okay, well, actually, I'm with you. I'm on board. But you know what? I have to say something about that. I'm like, that could not work for women. Like, that would be
Yeah,
so bad.
yeah.
I
It would not be. It'd be very dysfunctional. I mean, the idea of it's some weird and dysfunctional as it is, but yeah,
and like
definitely.
the voting, that'd be so
Yeah,
bad.
yeah.
So they should think about that. All right. Oh, I guess we could take these off.
Okay,
All
all
right.
right. Take
All
them
right.
off.
I want to ask you our final question, which I ask every guest, and that is, how do you move through jadedness? What is your hack?
Ooh, what's the hack? Why is it got to be a hack? I think that's the social media's created us that there's always got to be a hack, right? Um,
Flip the
I
script.
I think
Go off.
being jaded is human.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's not a hack. You have to just
Mm,
go through the emotions, a sense of like discomfort. Because I think the sense of jadedness is that you're like I said before, I feel like jadedness, the way I see it, being to be jaded is not to give up hope. It's just that you've been harmed. You've been trying to do something and you're like, fuck, that sucked, right? You're like, it's like
hmm
you are processing some sort of harm or discomfort, and that is generative in nature if you allow it to be generative, right?
hmm
The other danger of that, of course, is you just go down that path and you're like, man, fuck it all. I don't like, fuck, I don't fucking
You
care. That's
spiral.
real. You
Yeah.
spiral. But if you go into the expectation that, hey, we are going to be discomforted in this journey for liberation, that there are going to be numerous times we're going to be let down by ourselves or by others, but that we can use that as a form of to generate some positivity or to keep us propelling forward. And I think it helps. I think that's from the way I see it. Is like there's no really easy hack. It's just I think the biggest thing is in some ways to expect it,
hmm
to expect that you are going to
Mm.
become disillusioned at times,
Yes. Yeah.
to expect that you're going to be let down, right? Like those are. Mom Donnie's a good example. Mom Donnie is I'm fucking inspired. I love seeing Mom Donnie and all the work that he's doing, but also I'm realistic. I know that he's going to do some things in office for New York that people aren't going to be happy with.
Right.
He's going to let some folks down. Go into it expecting that, but
Mm-hmm.
not like, but it's so much nuance every step of the way. It's like, not to be like, oh, it doesn't matter. All politicians are corrupt. No, I'm just going to understanding that, hey, that he's not perfect. This
Mm-hmm.
movement's not perfect. We are not perfect. And we should dispel any belief that we should be perfect. And this whole
Mm.
um, purity test that we do upon ourselves is complete bullshit and colonial thinking at its purest degree, because we have to meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
You have to meet yourself where you're at. And attempts to like, no, I can't feel this way. I can't be this way because the people expect me to be constantly positive and moving forward. Well, then you're lying to yourself and you're not allowing yourself to be human. So
Mm.
that's the full circle, the sacred circle of it all.
I feel like the hack is decolonize and dismantle toxic positivity.
Yes, there it is. There's the hack. If you can find the roadmap for that, let me know.
Okay, yeah. Let us know because we're figuring it out. Well, thank you so much, Dallas. This has been really fun and really good to, yeah, just reconnect here and share some time.
I appreciate it. I still carry in my mind our memories at Standing Rock going sledding down the hills. And we would go
Oh,
sledding down the Facebook hill. And I keep that memory because amidst all the chaos and all the determination to like smash shit and fucking change shit, we also have to find space to find joy.
And
So
be silly.
and be silly.
Yeah, I have
So
so many.
thank you for demonstrating that to me and all the time that I've known you, and creating space for that in your work.
Thanks, Del.
Peace.